¿Empezamos?
Claro, María, adelante.
Sí, estoy esperando la confirmación técnica, por eso. Ahí chequeando.
Ah,
Okay, we're just waiting for the technical
Muy
confirmation
buenos
that we can
días.
begin.
Ajá, ahí estamos empezando. Muy buenos días, buenas medias mañanas, buenas tardes.
Good morning,
Se
everyone.
conecten con esta
Good
transmisión
afternoon, depending on when you are
institucional virtual Fondos
connecting to
Horas de
this
compromiso de
encounter,
acción en el financiamiento de la educación de personas jóvenes y adultas. EPJA.
financing of
Pues
education
los
for
esperamos
young
con
people and
muchísimo
adults,
entusiasmo, con muchísimas
EYPA.
ganas, ilusiones, desde las
Very
redes
excited
regionales por la EPJA,
to have this
constituida por
meeting.
6 redes regionales.
We
Tenemos
are
a la
constituted by
campaña
6
latinoamericana
regional
por la
networks.
educación clave, el
We
Consejo de
have the
Educación Popular
Latin
Latinoamericana
American
y
campaign for the right to
Interseccionales,
education
la Mirada
CLADE. We
Latinoamericana
have the
del Centro de
SEAL.
Comunicación Popular
We
Alerta,
have the Latin American
la
Association of
Internacional de Alegría
Popular
y el Consejo
Education,
Internacional de Educación de Adultos
and the
INADE, y ellas
International
incluyen
Council
nuestra querida
of
Red
Education for
Interregional
Adults,
Popular entre Mujeres de Latinoamérica y el
and
Caribe.
also our dear popular
Este
network
encuentro
of popular
transmitido
education of Latin
y
America.
tenemos en la
This
sala
encounter is
cabinas de
being
interpretación para español, portugués, inglés.
transmitted. We
Lo
have 3
podemos
cabins
acceder en
for
las redes en vivo
interpretation,
de nuestro
Portuguese,
portal de
Spanish, and
comunicación
English. We
y
can
en los
access
separadores
on
grabaciones
the
tenemos
below of the
soporte
screen,
técnico. Así que agradecemos
and we have
muchísimo
a technical support.
esta atención, este llamado.
We
Y
appreciate this your attention,
defendemos
your
la educación
coming
de
to
las personas
this
jóvenes y adultas.
encounter.
Nos ha puesto siempre en
The
el
human
foco
right
desde
of
nuestro
young
platform,
and adult
desde las
people.
organizaciones de la sociedad civil.
It's
Y
our
sabemos
focus
que
from our
desde los
platform and
compromisos de los
organizations.
estados para garantizar este derecho,
We know that
está
the commitment of states to guarantee
indefectiblemente
this right
vinculado al financiamiento.
is
Entonces,
directly
queremos actualizar
linked
los datos sobre el
to
financiamiento,
finance.
queremos profundizar sobre ello y ver
We
cómo
want to
estos
deepen
compromisos han podido avanzar, ojalá,
how is the
para todas las poblaciones y tener una
assignation of
respuesta
resources going,
en el año 2024, luego de la
how things are going in
Convención de
2024
Marrakech. Entonces,
in the
para tener
MFA,
una
Marrakech
versión
Framework for Action.
en auto, vamos a invitar a Agostina Constantino y Francisco Cantamuto,
So we're going to
consultores
invite
desde Argentina, quienes hicieron esta
2
investigación
consultants from
sobre el
Argentina who
financiamiento de la
leaded this
educación de personas jóvenes y
investigation
adultas en
about
América Latina y el
financing
Caribe, y les
of
escuchamos con muchísima atención. Francisco, Agostina,
education for young people and adults in Latin
adelante
America
con
and
la
Caribbean.
investigación, les escuchamos atentamente.
So let's hear what they have to say.
Hola, María, y a todos, todas quienes están presentes.
Hello, everyone. Maria, thank you for the invitation. I would like to share a presentation if possible.
Ya mismo.
Ahí me dicen si la pueden ver.
Perfecto.
Please confirm if you can see it.
Arrancamos por el
Yes.
final, ¿no? Bueno, 10 minutitos.
So it's 10
Bueno,
minutes.
de nuevo, gracias a quienes están presentes.
Thank you again
Escuchando y lo que
to
voy a
all of you
presentar
who
es
are
una
present here listening.
pequeñita,
I'm going to show you
una pequeña parte del
a
informe
short
que hicimos
part
para CLADE del año pasado
of
en
the
relación al financiamiento
report
de la educación
that
de
we
personas
made
jóvenes y
for
adultas,
that
y
last
ahora
year
me voy a
around
referir
the
a EPJA.
education of
Primero
young
quiero
and
señalar
adult
que
people. I'm
EPJA,
going to refer
no
to
me
it
falta
as
dejar
EPJA.
de señalar la importancia de la
I'm going
EPJA
to
en el
point
desarrollo
out
de educación a lo
the
largo de la vida,
importance of EPJA,
como derecho humano
the
por consolidar
education
convenciones y acuerdos,
as a human
todo el
right,
aspecto que tiene que ver con la mejora de las trayectorias propias
the
personales en
aspect
términos de empleo y desarrollo personal, pero
related
también
to
la
opportunities for
mejora
employment
de
and
la
personal
productividad
development,
y
and also the increase
trabajo
of productivity.
dinámico y mejora en términos de la cohesión social,
It improves
los
social
valores y valores
cohesion
que permite construir. Y no
and values
solamente
that
eso,
allow
que
to
hace
build
entonces al desarrollo personal y a
citizenship,
la
and
sociedad
also
en términos políticos y económicos,
the personal development
tiene un fuerte
and social
factor
and in political
para
terms.
todas
It
las
also
sociedades en
has a
términos de
strong
género y de manera interseccional, porque
aspect of
en general las
improving
mujeres y
gender
mujeres
equality,
desfavorecidas y de pueblos originarios son
as
las primeras que tienen que
or
abandonar la
the
escuela.
indigenous women are the
Esto es lo
first
que
one that
nosotros
have to
apuntamos
abandon
a sostener y
school.
fortalecer la EPJA,
So we
y
are
es ahí
pointing
donde
out
tenemos
to
que encarar los
strengthen
beneficiarios
the
en
EPJA,
situaciones particularmente
and they
vulnerables
are
del resto de la
one of our
sociedad.
main beneficiaries. as they have been abandoned by the education system. The financial commitments to EPJA have been settled in the latest meetings and agreements, specifically in the 2030 agenda. It is specifically in the goal 4 and 6. There is an explicit reference to the development of capacities in education. It hasn't always been taken into account, and the work that we have done around financing and monitoring of the education. The states have the obligation to assign resources, and this has been pointed out in a very clear way in the Marrakech Framework of Action in the point 29 that specifically points out the importance of this component. These details can be seen in the report. What I want to point out is that there has been several declarations, agreements between states and Latin America that point out the importance and the relevance of financing education for young people and adults under the focus of long life learning. The models of finances for young and adult people in education are 6. The public one, financing by the state; the private one, financing by companies; combined one, the 2 previous, the one that is based on help for development; the personal one, which is the people investing; and the voluntary one, meaning a communitarian one. The ways of moving forward by adults are different, and there are some difficulties on trying to get centralized information of all the mechanisms that are financing these efforts. It is important to point out this aspect. There are so many sources of financing the EPJA. It is a challenge to build the information. Besides this, it is important to point out that some aspects of the specific models, the one that is based on development, it is mostly focused in children living outside, youth and adults. Regarding private financing, there is we're not sure about the real commitment of this sector, which is focused on education for work. Voluntary or communitarian financing. Many of these organizations are part of the CLADE. They're friends, and they carry out a big effort to have an impact on vulnerable spaces. But when the financing of these initiatives come from the community itself, there is a risk to reinforce the inequalities that caused the problem at the beginning. Without criticizing it, it is important to consider how important it is the source of financing. In this sense, it is important to point out these following aspects. There are many initiatives on a state level, regional municipalities, And these actors don't necessarily coordinate their actions among themselves. In general, in Latin America and the Caribbean, most programs of EPJA are centered in the Ministry of Education. But other ministries not necessarily linked to education and work. Finally, is this discussion about the conception of EPJA as a part of training for work that is only focused in the reinsertion of people in their own environment. This is very important for what I'm mentioning later. In the Belén framework,
Ok, no hay problema, María. En el marco de Belén hay dos
the
puntos.
Belén framework has 2 points, 11A, 11G, that speak about the necessity of indicators to evaluate the commitments of the EPJA. Latin American Caribbean, the commitment was 3%. CONFINTEA VII in 2022 emphasizing the relevance of monitoring and evaluating. But in the previous consultation, Latin American Caribbean states recognized they don't have enough importance, even when they committed to invest most in this area. It's something that they have been saying since 2009. The global report included a consultation, and the result is that most countries don't know what the EPJA is spending financing. 23 countries of Latin American and Caribbean offered official data. Half of them said that they spent the same amount in 2018. Only 13 of those countries could actually identify clear expenses, and only 8 could offer exact data of their financing. I'm not stopping in this data, I'm just showing you how much it varies, the total expense in education in different countries. So we see a huge difference. There's a big variability going from less than $1 per person comparing to other financings in the same region. It's the importance of EPJA is not under discussion. Financing has multiple sources, but the assignations of state are very important. This is an agenda problem, how you label it, and not having a clear methodology. And these are the first impressions with this information. Thank you very much, Francisco. We also put the link on the chat so that you can see the whole report. If you have any doubts or questions, you can write it down or share it in the chat. So making the most out of this time, we're going to Chile, where recently there was a meeting with the Marrakech framework for action and the long life learning projects in Chile. So she's going to share the case of Chile and the reflections, their reflections.
Hola, buenos días. Agradezco esta invitación y agradezco también la presentación previa de Francisco porque le coloca.
Thank you for the invitation for the previous exhibition of Francisco. I thought a lot about it was worth to have a presentation. But what I'm going to do in this presentation is to share questions.
Ahora sí. Perdonen, pero estoy tan acostumbrada ya al Teams que me estoy complicando.
Excuse me, I'm very used to go to Teams. I'm complicating. I'm a little bit complicated. Let's remember that we are in transmission. We're interpreting to English and Portuguese. So whoever just joined right now, you can access to the interpretation on your screen.
Sí, mi problema es que estoy acostumbrada al Teams y me estoy enredando. Aquí está. Perfecto. Ahora sí.
Muy bien.
Voy a ponerlo en modo presentación.
Now we go.
Ahora sí. Yo la primera pregunta que me hice, ¿es solo un problema de financiamiento?
So the first question I asked myself is this just a problem of financing or this is the expression of other problems? So as Francisca said, it's been decades that we've been saying that the lack of finance is due to the EPJA. We've been claiming for the commitments over and over. So is this a problem of financing or is this problem reflecting something else? I believe that in spite of everything that Francisco said, and we agree, and what comes to contributing to the EPJA, however, the education, youth, and adult people is quite invisible for public policies and also for the education system in general. So in some way, this reflects the lack of importance that the adult education has. And also our difficulty from the education for adults field to actually convince others about how valuable is education for youth and adults. From the Ministry of Education, I've been sending about 6 reports about the importance of this subject, the importance of finances and the impact of financing, but they're not reaching. Something is happening in the ways that we are communicating. So it's important to identify which are the expenses and so is financing only available budget? It's also a question that I asked myself. So we have some topics that we have to talk about. The financing is a combination of the capacity to govern, to achieve resources, and the budget changes and norms that are required. So we go from one government to another with resources that are not changing the structure of financing. And in the way we govern, it also is also impacted by an inheritance of the past. You do not govern on the air, you govern with the structures and the problems that came from the past. There are structures from the financing regime in general that we have inherited from previous models. And it doesn't only have to do with the executive level, but it's also the importance of the GDP. And to speak about financing is to speak about structures. It's not about budget only. So how to go from commitments
That for me is
how to
the
go from
key
commitments and
question.
recommendations to the construction of a policy for the EPJA.
As we said, this has to be a study. Absolutely, that has to include everything, including the last conference we had after CONFINTEA in Santiago de Chile. It was we had a very good participation. So also there is another topic. We have to look at the studies that are the base for these mechanisms of financing. There was a ministry meeting in January of this year in Santiago. And the question was, which studies demonstrated this? We have partial studies, we have approximations, but we need to have more clear data. And it seems like this process is very relevant. The Agenda 2030 for Latin America, I imagine they will refer to this topic. It sounds like it's very important in this process where public policies are prioritized. So, however, if we don't have an incidence in this process, there's no sense. How can we have this incidence? We also have to ask, which role can we play with the cooperation agencies? I think the response is no, but we can help so that this can be in the agenda by the incidence. We need more international cooperation, or else we're not going to modify the structure. And that's what I believe has to be the recommendation. But it's not enough. Here's a small reflection about the governance and the commitment to financing. If you could take a look. I know we don't have, we have time with time, so there's no time to read slowly. It seems to me that this is the key idea of the sustainable development goals for Latin America. We need to have this contribution from society. That's a great challenge for us. And I would like to end by saying that mention what's happening with Chile. We have lots of pressure. It's been very difficult. In Chile, all the subventions I would like to explain that the subsidies for all educational system in Chile, it's paid by each student. The cost is calculated by an average assistance given to the students. So there's no fixed subventions or subsidies. The financing works in relation to the number of students, and it happens throughout the whole school system. During the dictatorship, we watched what happened. We have now these neoliberal ideas in education. So the subsidy is calculated by average need. And every day we go to class every day and we see the difficult we have during the pandemic was very difficult. Then we started reflecting about this daily assistance, and we had no access to other subsidies. For example, for high vulnerability students. So there's a difference in resources. This has been aggravated and it's very complex. So we need to seek other solutions. It's very complex. I believe that people who dedicate to study this will agree with me. But we need to find a solution. In Chile, the solution is being paid by this average assistance. So we have remedial assistance constantly, but it's not a solution. So I would like to end with this question. Is this just a financing problem, or is this an expression of other problems? Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria Eugenia. And thank you for awakening this interest in deepening this debate. So people could write in the chat if you have any comment. And in Guatemala, we have some contact with a dear comrade in the area of education. So his name is Francisco Cabrera. He is going to show us a panorama of the situation's perspectives in Guatemala. Thank you, Maria. And thank you to Clave for this invitation with topics so provocative. And also the organizations participating in the CL. They are in my heart. And I'm happy to see colleagues like Rosie, Maria Eugenia from the entire region and others. I'll try to answer the question that was just posed about if it's a question of financing or not, or if there are other underlying issues. I would like to say first that it's important to participate in these spaces. There are some distinct scenarios, but the ideas prevail, and the struggles and the commitments also. So I'd like to leave this reflection around this topic today. I believe that somehow, like it was said before today, that there is effectively a problem of sensibility about public policies in education. But I would say in general that in this scenario, we need to re-educate the public, to distinct the public, and raise the awareness of their potential. And it has to be recognized. In this document mentioned by Francisco before, we are very clear, but these documents are not a part of the public policies. They are not in the offices. They are in someone's file, but they're not being used effectively. And what do we have to do so that those commitments become part of the agendas? I believe that the first topic we have to deal with is to re-educate. We have to start with the functionality of education, not just as a synonym of scholarity. And following what Maria Eugenia said before, it's difficult sometimes to let go of the ties and to have a change in the government and a change in focus. So to me, that's the first topic. The employee that works in planning, they simply don't see the need to include them. We need to add our commitments. It's not a basic idea. We have to re-educate also the political class. They play a role, but they don't see the importance of adults in particular. It's always just the youth, but we have to look at the important economic impact of education of adults as well. And third, we have to re-educate the society and all the populations. It's important to have schools for boys and girls, and that they have teachers and books. So this is a right. But for adult people to access, to access education is not seen as a right. So people who participate in these programs of adult education are so thankful. Thank you, President. Thank you to this organization or that, because it's seen as an extraordinary effort to offer this opportunity. But the society sometimes doesn't see adult education as a right. So first, the importance of re-educate and reposition this topic. My second idea has to do with the programming, especially in public policies. So effectively, it's not sensible to have some increments in some areas when we have to navigate with very narrow budgets and with the budgeting restrictions. So the budgeting in public areas, it's not done spontaneously. Some steps need to be articulated, and we have to have some legal parameters, and that's very difficult in countries like Guatemala. And especially with the problems, when there are problems like corruption, even at the federal level. So we have to align all those things and all those parts. So finally, we can first justify an increment in the financing for education. And we have to fight for this. We have to break this budget rigidity, especially in the educational systems, which have been functioning with very insufficient budgets. Guatemala is an extreme case. So education is a very difficult problem there. But I believe that's a reality that's common to other countries in Caribbean and Latin America. So how to change this? Not fast. We have to have long-term goals, not from one day to another. This takes time. We have to have efforts that, first of all, justify that more resources are destined to this area, that they are necessary, and they will have a positive effect. And we have to ensure that these new resources can be executed, meaning they have to be invested wisely. For example, are we creating a new program or implementing an existing program and increase the capacity of people? So is there an effective execution of the planning of the program? So that way we don't have a regression and there will be a reversion in the public financing. It can be done. And I also would like to put to throw out a third idea, which is the social imaginary, to put the right to education in the imaginary of the society, and also meaning to better opportunities, to provide the better opportunities for the population, because the idea, there's this idea that the school will have an effect in long term. But we don't talk so much about the education of adults. We are trying to find solutions, immediate solutions to problems that we have now, and not for problems in the future. For example, immigration in a country like Guatemala is very a serious problem. Every day we see problems with immigration, with people being expelled from the United States, from Mexico. So every day we are dealing with people coming from the south or from other continents that come through here to go to Mexico and to reach the border with the United States. So this is a phenomenon where there are some peculiarities to Guatemala. So we're looking at the basic schools for boys and girls, and what happens is the enrollment goes down when kids are only 11, 12 years old. They are already thinking about migrating. So this is a phenomenon that did not exist maybe 10, 20 years ago. And why? Because of lack of opportunities. So people are leaving. So we have millions of people in this situation. And our education program is also a way to offer programs for people in other countries in the region. So that's what I would like to mention here. So the education of the youth and the adult is not in the social imaginary. People are not thinking about that. They're thinking about going back to school for 5 years to get a diploma. But we need to offer faster solutions, immediate solutions, and material conditions. To me, that's a very important aspect that we needed to look at in this area of work. And so I would like to finish this intervention by saying that the education of the adults and the youth, like anything else in public education, is a political action. We have to focus it as a political action. And if I want to have the budgets, like other people have mentioned, we have to look at the international phenomena and what's happening in the Caribbean, America Latina, and we need to understand the reality. But there are at least two things. We need to make this a political topic, not just a social topic, but also political one of public policies. And we need to focus on that. And in particular, that it's necessary that this system will have, for example, the employees that are committed to make things move forward. We also need some directions. We don't have groups, we don't have communities that are demanding this. So we need the demand. So many things that happen in public policies happen in response to public demands. We need to have petitions, and we need social pressure to move the governments and the political policies in the countries. So we needed to work in a more factual way and to imagine the future in a better way. So those are 4 ideas that I threw out there. A little bit of a testimony too, but also trying to answer Francisco and Maria. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for taking note of this very rich exchange that is happening. We have confirmations that would be followed in the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico. So we are open for messages, questions, and comments. Colombia says that there's a big visibilization of the EPJA in the state, despite that it is so important, being more and more persons expelled from the education system in different levels. Alejandro Ventura says that it's too bad that EPJA is not only about financing, but about minimizing its importance as a ministry. Politics just see it as a school for children. In the case of Dominican Republic, it is considered Valentina Suero, it is required to review the formation programs of EPJA. It is important for the youth and adult people that have to finish their studies and a technician formation for the work.
Disculpa que te interrumpa, pero creo que vale la pena leer estas dos preguntas para que Francisco vaya pensando.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's worth it to read these two questions so that Francisco elaborates the responses.
Déjame ubicar porque, ajá. De Mauricio Velasco, muy interesante la
So from Mauricio Velasco, very interesting the presentations. I have two questions for Francisco. Why more university and study centers are not investigating subjects as a contribution of EPJA, for example, the strengthening of young people in the labor sphere, and why the information of EPJA in state level is not consolidated through national institutes of statistics and census that are constructing indicators and building statistics studies on these areas. We can discuss that on our next intervention. And there's two questions about the academy and the commitment in research and the data linked to census and access to information. I believe that Francisco said that he had to go to the Congress soon. I don't know if you have 2 minutes to answer to these questions before you leave. I mean Francisco Cabrera. I think right now he might be heading. We make notes and oh, there he is. I'm about to leave. I'm very close to the parliament. I planned this way so that I can make it on time. I would like to try to answer right now these two questions. Yes, we understand your situation. Please go ahead. I believe that in terms of the statistics and census institutes and similar institutions, is that effectively they analyze the topics regarding the main urgencies of countries, and this topic is not that important in that agenda. It's not documented enough, the impact and the benefit that the positive effect that the EPJA has and the possibility of improving income for families and also for the country. I think that has to be documented and shown more. Statistics institutes tend to be very rigid, very traditional in their mechanisms of analysis and research. And they create processes over what they have been working on. That's why I referred on the necessity of re-educating people and put these topics on the agenda. The meetings in January is very good that education and taxes ministries were there. It is not enough because ministries, tax authorities go to the meeting and they commit, but then when they come back, they see the reality, and reality is based on the demand. So I think that those who are in the public sphere and in social activism in communitary organizations, our task is to make this visible and turn this into a right. A right is a right until it is demanded. If it's not demanded, it's only in paper, it's only theory. And I think that EPJA is, in our case, one of the topics that required a declaration, a jump from paper to concrete actions. Thank you very much, Maria. I take this time to be grateful and hope to see you soon. Best of luck, Francisco, in your day. Thank you for seizing this moment to broaden the information. We motivate you to comment and make questions. We remind you that we are transmitting in English and Portuguese That's why our colleague interpreters ask us to speak a little bit slower so that their work can be easier. Remind you that this invitation, thanks to the platform of regional organizations. Now we go back to Santiago, to the UNESCO office, with the chief of the Unity of Monitoring and Planification of Education, Alejandro Vera, who accepted to join to this dialogue to share reflections on the public financing for education for young and adult people. Alejandro, go ahead. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. And thank you very much, Maria and Claudia and Nilsi. Oh, you're always leading this event. Thank you for the invitation to this encounter. As you say, when I got the invitation, the topic was a financing situation from the data. So my first thought was to make a very short presentation because data was what we lack the most, as Francisco said. But what I try to put together and share with you now aims to try to put the education for youth and adult people in a more general context of the educational financing in the region, and to speak about what we do know about financing, especially what comes up from the reports of the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and the GRAL Inform report. So if you give me a minute, I'll share my screen and we start. We see it perfectly. So firstly, I retake what Francisco was saying about the difficulty of building precise information about financing of this sector, that is education for youth and adult people. The last version of the GRAL synthesizes the main problems. Firstly is the centralized nature of this sector, meaning the amount of actors working on the EPJA inside and outside the public sector. So that complexity makes it hard to build information, not only financially, but in general. There's a big problem of data and statistics on this aspect. When we speak of different levels of government, this also generates difficulty to consolidate information. I'm talking about lack of information, but there's also the consolidation of information to generate policies. We also know there's not a specific budget for this sector. And I would like to stop there a bit, because Maria Eugenia mentioned it very well in her description of the Chilean case, that the financing of EPJA in our region is in some way assimilated in the public financing for education inside the Ministry of Education. So it just flows along with the whole public financial. But in spite of that, it doesn't manage to participate in all the programs that the governments implement. So it doesn't receive the same benefits of all other programs. Seeing these difficulties, I would like to say that the financing of EPJA is a part of this bigger public financing for education. We should know and what is its state. Francisco and María explained it, there are international commitments that are being repeated over and over, different general instruments. And in the case of the financing, we all know the recommended range by the education goal of 2030, that the assigned budget should be between 4 and 6% of the GPD. When we see what has happened about the complement of these two indicators, if we see it on midterm, when it comes to the compliance of these agendas, we see that in the last 20 years, in general, the average countries in the region have been complying with this minimum. We are over the 15% of the GPD in total, the 4.3% of the GPD. But in the recent period between 2015 on, and that it goes along with the new agenda of the 2030, there is a block in the moving forward of those finances. In 2014, there was a peak, and after that, there was a decrease. We are still above the minimum required, but it has stopped. The growth has stopped. When we see the education for adults, we see that the situation is repeats. We see that between 2018, 2019, 2020, when the last report takes the data, our region, Latin American Caribbean, when analyzing the budgets for education for adults, we were decreasing or we had stopped growing. So we see that it is consistent with what we've seen. We're in a stagnant of the budgets. What worries me the most about that is again that ended in 2019. That during and after COVID, you see in this frame that was presented in the ministry's meeting about the educational financing of the region. The budget of the public expenses in different lines, health, household, is the blue part. And if you see historically, education occupies around 35% of social investment. There was an important change during COVID. It went from 35 to 30 in 2020, and it repeats in 2021. So this confirms what was said during COVID, and it was that education wasn't being prioritized in the programs to face and overcome COVID. And now we see the evidence. This is what is happening to the public financial in education. And as we said, public adult education is even less. So this is a very concerning tendency, because to the stagnant that we mentioned, we can add the fall to the finances during COVID. If we have to make a balance of how the countries are doing, from 15 to 20% of the public total expenses, 4 to 3% of the GPD. And we see that there is a situation that we have to break, because countries can argument that they are complying. They can say that they are in the average, But as we all know, this is not sufficient to achieve an education like the ones our international agendas are demanding. So what Maria Eugenia said makes a lot of sense. We need to evidence and document the necessity, because we tell a country that they are complying the 4 or 5% of the, that they're complying with the numbers. How do we tell them that that is not sufficient? So what is the education that we need, and how much do we need for that to be able to break that tendency of stagnant that we are experiencing? I would like to take a couple of more minutes to mention 2 or 3 interesting topics that are on the report. There are 2 or 3 things that are important to highlight. One is that I see it as a good news, but Francisco showed it as a less optimist way. So there are a group of countries of the region. There are about 13. Here we see that there are 23. They say they have a budget line for adult education. That is important because they are saying that in the budget, they can identify adult education. Surely what they are saying is that they have a budget oriented towards adult education or the organism that leads those processes. That's good news because we can follow closely what they're doing. So the more countries that can identify that line in their budget, there's a bigger opportunity for follow-up and accountability. So that's an aspect we should work on and make it grow in the region. Second, I think that draw my attention on the island that I would like to speak to you is that compared to the rest of the world, there are some countries that still identify little participation of non-state actors, and on a worldwide, in our the countries worldwide identified a bigger participation of the private sector in that aspect, and in our region is just 19%. So we still have time to improve that. And finally, this is on a global scale. So inside of the financing for adults education, what is the emphasis on different groups? So the more gray and green you have the line, the more focus there are on vulnerable populations. On the other scale, there's people who are being less considered, elders and immigrants, indigenous people. So even inside of the adult education, we have to analyze which groups are reaching the most. Because even the whole subtopic of education for adults could be considered as a big effort in the state programs. We could make an exercise to identify more specificities. So these are the last messages. I think I already took more than 10 minutes. We know that the main actor of the financing is the government and the Ministry of Education. This is a reality. So our attention is mostly on this sector. But we also know that the investment of the public sector in education is decreasing or is stagnant. As Francisco said, this is a political topic to attend. This is a marriage that is suffering from the regional tendency of financing. Now you have a minute. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a space for greater participation of other actors. And it is necessary to work for a more just distribution of resources, because when resources are scarce, you think that the situation is not going to be addressed, but we need to pay more attention to the distribution and use of resources. So to be efficient, to be equitative, and we have to pay attention to these topics. What we have to invest properly and where it's needed the most. And the last point, it is a claim and a call to keep on working together in the financing. I don't have to tell you this, you know this better than me. What it's needed is to establish clear boundaries of the education for youth and adult people. Sometimes producing data is hard because it is difficult to conceptualize what enters inside of this topic, what it is made of, what are its boundaries, and that is important to produce precise data. This is it for me. I stay until the end.
Thank you. We have different comments about the budget in the states, about access, and the need to have this analysis of available data. Let's have a mini round of final words with the participants here, but it has to be only about 2 minutes each because we are going over time. So we only have 2 minutes if you want to make a little comment. I'd like to mention this historical reparation. We know people who did not even finish their elementary education, and it's so important to change a bit the narrative when we're talking about education for adults and put it as a topic that we can't talk about just childhood. Education is intergenerational. So how do we explain that political educational policies focus only on childhood? This is one thing. On the other side is that it's about our alliance with universities. In Chile, there is no subjects, no courses in pedagogy related to adult education. There are 1 or 2 courses about adult education, but there is no integrated view on the importance of adult education. And one very interesting thing is the following. The young people that get involved with adult education, they want to keep on working with adult education. This is very relevant. It's about dignity. And here's what what we have, not talking just about budgeting, but we need to talk about the commitment of the teachers with the students. It has to do with the pedagogical action that needs to be strengthened. I have so many other things to say, but I don't have the time. But I have many other ideas to share. Yeah, I would like to continue listening to you, but we'll take notes for the next time. Let's go to Argentina with Francisco Cantamuto. You have 2 minutes too, as well. 2 minutes. Thank you, Maria. I just want to thank everyone. This is very motivating, but especially I'd like to make a public, I'd like to show my gratefulness to Alexandro. His contribution is very important for his position. And in respect to different topics, it's very, of course, it's very difficult to say everything in a few minutes, but I'd like to highlight at least 2 aspects that are very relevant. One is the topic that was underlined here about this minimal budget to guarantee adult education. We have made advancements in education, but in order to continue, move forward in this way, we have to think, what is the minimum possibility to allow people to continue their education? And some definitions may limit, but we need a baseline to guarantee. We need to establish how much it will cost, this baseline, and we need to finance these public policies. The second point related to this has to do with if the resources are finite. There is a committee and the World Bank, and there is a privilege that need to be discussed and need to be put as a priority. I also have to highlight the importance that in Latin America and in Caribbean this year, we need there is a need for fiscal reform, income tax reform. We need these progressive measures to reduce the decriminalization and inequalities. Thank you so much again. We need fiscal justice. We need to deepen this. Alejandro, 2 minutes. I know that you have lots to say. Yes, for sure. I just like to point out that there is something that goes along the lines of what Maria Eugenia was saying. Adult education, sometimes it's not positioned politically within the budgets, and is the first one to suffer cuts. Many times there's a priority given to the traditional basic levels of education, and in the education of adults suffer this situation of cuts to the budget. And I've been talking to other countries too. It happened especially during the COVID and in other places where there is a complex financial situation. So it's important to construct this rhetoric to protect adult education. from these cuts. So there is a ministry, there will be a ministry, a meeting of the Ministry of Education, which will be very important. And we need to start developing what kind of discourse we need to have. We can, of course, there will always be struggles within education. We need to make this effort to establish or to find the benefits and the impact of adult education. A document for financial sustainability needs to be elaborated. We need to recuperate, to recover the importance for adult education. We needed to build this mentality, to position adult education in a place, and so that resources cannot be taken away from them. And this is the context that we've been finding in the last few years in our region. Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. We have, let's ask for a few more minutes because we still have Nicholas Jonas. He works for the institution for monitoring of the EPJA. He works in Montevideo. His presentation is in English, so we're going to have some interpretation. So we invite you to listen to this video.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicolas Jonas. I am the head of the Global Report on Adult Learning and Education, and I am team leader at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. On behalf of UIL, I'm very pleased and honored to be here today on the invitation of our partner CLADE for Latin America. And the topic of my presentation will be financing adult learning and education, and updates from GRAIL, and particularly GRAIL 5. So let's start first by giving a global perspective on what is happening in the field of adult learning and education. Before starting, I wanted to highlight that, as you very well know, I guess, the financing of the subsector of adult learning and education is quite a complicated topic for several reasons. First, we are lacking a lot of data on this field, and it's not only because countries do not want to report on what they are currently doing, but it is also because they do not have the proper tools for reporting on what is the public, what are the figures for public spending in adult learning and education. In most cases, all the public interventions and all interventions in general are really multi-sectoral, involving several ministries, several public authorities, as well as a huge range of different stakeholders playing key roles, particularly from the civil society, in adult learning and education. So, in a nutshell, if you do not have in place very efficient coordinating mechanisms, it's quite difficult to report on what is really happening on financing for adult learning and education. This being said, let's go back to what are the current international commitments in this field. If we look 15 years back, about from the Belém Framework for Action that was adopted in 2010, and the recommendation on adult learning and education, we can see that if there is something that never changes, is that countries commit to increase their investment in adult learning and education, but never give specific targets. in all the negotiations I contributed to, particularly for the Marrakech Framework for Action in 2022. Each time we tried to include precise targets in terms of percentage of public budget, education budget dedicated to adult learning and education, member states removed it. It's quite difficult to have a concrete commitment. And this we can understand also. It's not just that they don't want to commit. It's also that it's difficult to commit to something on which you do not have a clear control and a clear tools in hand for monitoring. But still, states are making efforts. States try to enhance and empower the adult learning and education sector. If we look at what is the evolution of the changes on adult learning and education spending over the world, we can see that from grade 5, we learned that for about half of the country, the spending did not move, did not change on adult learning and education, and even increased in 1/3 of the cases. And for Latin America, it's more or less the same. We are in the same average, same trend. Now, if we look a bit more on the future, what are the plans regarding public spending? Do countries think about increasing, maintaining, or decreasing spending on adult learning and education? We can see that countries are a bit more optimistic, with half of them planning to increase their investment in adult learning and education. And here, in that situation, Latin America is a bit different, with only 35% of countries who commit or who plan to increase their investment in adult learning and education. So how much exactly do countries spend in this sector? Once again, it's quite difficult to get a concrete figure. If you can read on this graphic that 27% of responding countries just do not know how much do they spend. But if we stay at quite a high view on this spending, with just asking for a range of spending, normally we have an unset target, which would be nice if countries could dedicate 4% of their education budget to adult learning and education. But we can see that we are far from this target, with only 15% of responding countries who declared that they already reached this target of 4%. Another important aspect is to look at what are the goals of the public spending to adult learning and education. What kind of learners, what kind of programs do these investments really target? We can expect from the state not to control everything, of course, on adult learning and education, not to finance everything, but at least to play an important role in empowering some groups, some disadvantaged groups, by providing them with specific skills and knowledge who can help them to navigate in the society. So if we look at the targeting groups, the target groups of the public spending for adult learning and education, we can see that still over the world, youth and unemployed people are the main targets, meaning that most of the programs funded by countries, by public authorities, are dedicated to upskilling and reskilling. One point of concern is that some of groups who could be in need, strong need of education and learning, particularly indigenous people, older peoples, and peoples from minorities, are not so much targeted so far by public interventions and by public programs. And it's clearly an area of focus on which civil society organizations are massively present, and on states should be much more here to support the civil society organization and to organize this intervention for minority groups, indigenous people, and older adults. So I told you at the beginning of the presentation that the financing of the sector is quite complicated. And for sure, the states cannot play and should not, we could discuss about it, play the unique role of funder for adult learning and education. It's important to see what is the weight of other funders in the financing of adult learning and education. We can expect at least two big players, which are the private sector and international mechanisms, international cooperation through development agencies or international cooperation. So in the world, and in comparison with Latin America, we can see that there is quite a, how can I say, not a divide, but a difference between Latin America and the Caribbean region and the rest of the world. In your region, the weight of international cooperation and the weight of private sector are quite low in financing adult learning and education. This means several things. It means first that a lot of interventions rely still on public intervention. Secondly, it means also that a lot of programs for adult learning and education are funded by families or learners themselves. And I think there is a room here for advocating on the importance and impact on adult learning and education for the region, and how private sector should be involved as well in all these initiatives and should contribute, because it's also in their interest if adult learning and education can expand. As a conclusion, I wanted to come back very quickly on the quality of the data that we can get on adult learning and education. So we could target with GRAIL about 208 countries over the world. For GRAIL 5, we sent 196 questionnaires to countries, to member states, and we received responses or national report from 158, which is quite important, and this success was achieved thanks to the huge mobilization of civil society organizations. Almost all of them managed to reach the questions on financing, the questionnaire. So it's already quite an achievement because the questionnaire was a bit long for GRAIL 5. And we managed to get 100 responses from countries on what is a percentage or the range of percentage of education spending devoted to adult learning and education. But when we speak about very concrete percentage and not only a range, we managed to get only 60% of responses from member states, and out of the 60, only 53 were updated and were covering the period of GRAIL 5, which means in conclusion that out of the 208 potential countries over the world, we have good and updated detailed data for only 1/4 of countries. And we don't know, or we know very few about the rest. And this is why at UL we are launching now research to estimate what is the part of the public spending going into adult learning and education. And the idea is to come up with a common methodology and to do it and to consult at national level to manage to get once for all very good and comparative data, which could be the basis of an advocacy effort to increase and improve, I would say, the investment, public investment in adult learning and education. This is the end of my presentation. Once again, I'm sorry not to be here. I would really love to engage with you in a debate on the current state of financing of adult learning and education. But I hope you found some interesting ideas through this presentation. And should you have any question, please send them to the organizer, and I will reply to you in 1 week for sure. And I wish you a very good discussion, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye.
Agradecemos a Nicolás Jonas quien nos hizo llegar este video.
We're grateful to Nicholas Jonas who sent us this video and led us to deepen on the value form. Merci Lizarazo coordinating. Claude, she's very active on the regional network. This was very interesting. I've learned so much. I took many notes because there is so much to do, and we have to see how we can do it between all of us and all the ones that are involved. There are very important and interesting keys in terms of research, studies, data, research. I believe that this dialogue with colleagues that are in the public sector and that they see what we see from our end, they see it from their end, makes it a very provocative and interesting dialogue. I won't say much, only that we all have a lot of ideas in our minds that we have to think about how to make them happen, to be able to deliver information that contributes to this twist in the imperative narrative about this subject and in public policies as well as in the public budget. How can we deliver useful information to be able to connect the expenses of the budgets, not only from the Ministry of Education, but also other ministries and public institutions, because this is a subject where other ministries are involved. There is a huge amount of topics that we can still explore and discuss in order to sustain. I think this is the goal of this platform, the effort and the wisdom. It is an effort to sustain, to maintain the topic in the agenda. Instead of it disappearing, we make it more important, more relevant. We need to re-educate. I think this is very important. I am very grateful to everyone who has been here today, to all of those who stayed until the end. This will be the platforms. You can use it for other actions on national, regional levels. We will make it. We will seize of this material. And we will, of course, call for new dialogues to discuss about the new topics that came on purpose to the regarding to the financing. I believe, Maria, that we can close now. I would like you to propose to read out loud Gonzalez is sharing here. And with that, I think we can we can finish. You know that I'm very enthusiastic, but I am very excited about with the ideas that have come up from this gathering. Alejandro, we're going to have to talk about this. Well, Nora González comment, 2 relevant points. The ODS 4.6 speaks about alphabetizations for a population of between 15 and 24 years, living outside all the rest of adult population. Besides, it's not asking for transparency on the education, lifelong education. There is an interpretation of human right education that is guaranteed until secondary school and university, living outside along life learning, which sets the message that education is only for children and people until 24 years. We're also being congratulated for this initiative. We are very grateful to all those who have been attentive to this meeting. Thank you to Agustin and the research team. Eugenia Letelier, Francisco Cabrera. He joined us from Guatemala from the public sector, Alejandro Vera from UNESCO, Nicolas Jonas, and all the team who made this possible to be able to communicate in the best way, the interpreters team. Ramon Simon, Teresa Ray, Taina Almeida, Camila Franco, Liz Granda, technical support, Janaina Wamura, and of course, the team that made all these contacts and made this possible. Rosy Zúñiga, Tita, people from the International Federation Alegría, Clay. We invite you to follow us on our social media so that we can meet on the next gathering. See you next time.
Buen día para todos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.